talking about the budget impact from various angles, and for startups, it's truly a good day. The big sword hanging over the head was the angel tax, which has been around from a very, very long time. Budget after budget, you have this representation and request, please give us relief from angel tax. Well, this time it's actually happened. The angel tax goes. And, you know, we've got the first reactions coming in. Vinita Singh, co-founder and CEO of Sugar Cosmetics, with us on this special show where we understand how much the budget really boosts Startup India. Amit Jain, co-founder and CEO of Car Dekho Group, with us. And we're also speaking with Ashish Tulsian, CEO of Posist. Welcome to all of you, and great to have you on this conversation where we're discussing all things budget. Well, let's start with the angel tax question. Vinita, why don't you go first? This has been a long-term ask, and from your smile, I can see you're really happy about it.
Yes, I'm very happy and very grateful to the finance minister to finally give us the wish that startups have been asking, not just startups, but even venture capitalists, because the 30% angel tax on early stage investing was a big, big barrier. And I think all of this will result in the startup ecosystem getting a massive boost. Early stage funding is going to go up, I believe, by 20-30%, creating a lot more opportunities for startups and eventually a lot more employment. So a very, very big green flag from the budget this year, and something that we've been waiting for almost a decade now. And all the startups that I know have gone through that journey of having to deal with income tax officials around angel taxes. And I think this is a big relief.
All right, so the angel tax was a bit of a dark angel tax. Amit, I want to know, of course, your reaction, and sort of give us I'm sure you've done a back of the envelope calculation by now. Give us an idea of what the impact is for a startup once this tax is removed.
Look, the taxation was 30% earlier, which is now practically nothing, zero. So the impact is actually huge. And problem was that you have not made money and you still had to kind of incur taxes earlier, which probably gets sorted out. You have to, so if you buy a 1 rupee and then the fair market value increases, the tax was being recognized. There were so many files open. I think now everything would be put to rest. So overall, I personally think, from my personal perspective, as well as anybody investing in angel investing in startups, this is going to be a very big boost. Many people who are sitting on the edge to invest would now probably join the bandwagon. It's not just financial, it's also about creating new Bharat 2.0, which will have a big impact with this clarity that has come now on taxation.
It goes on from now, so I don't know if the files that are already open close overnight, but you know, it's hence on. Ashish Tulsian, your response to the angel tax relief, and also, is this coming at a time when there has been a concern that startup funding is drying up, and that's been happening for a while, I think the last 2-3 years or so. So even as private capex is increasing, etc., that whole startup buzz sort of has been dying. Do you think that this is the trigger to revive it?
I think this is definitely a trigger to revive, a really welcome step. But to Amit's point, I think the biggest problem with angel tax was not only the fact that you're paying 30% of the money that you're raising, which you are raising from your equity. So technically, you're paying tax via your equity. But more than that, the problem with angel tax was that it was penalizing startup entrepreneurs from valuing their startup, for its future value, for its potential, where, the tax officer was looking at a fair market valuation basis current asset. And then most of the startups, unlike, Vinita here, and most of the startups are tech startups. We don't have assets. We have intellectual property as asset. Amit will agree to this. So it was very difficult to get to that fair market valuation in the eyes of the tax inspector. And hence, people were getting harassed, through this cycle, and then paying a delta of the tax on the money raised. So I think abolishing it is a great step. Startup entrepreneurs are not only going to, have a breath of relief. I think angel investors are just going to, be more, I should say, risk-taking on the startup entrepreneurs now, given that, this is also a declaration that it was a bad, tax practice. And I sincerely hope that Finance Minister also clarifies, I don't know if they have already, whether this will impact the existing open books or at least startups who raised money between 2016 and 2024, will it still apply to them? I hope that it gets clarified and no more startups get tax notices. By the way, we were one of the victims of startup tax back in 2016, 17, 18, and it was quite a tyranny.
Okay, so do you see, I'll follow up to Ashish here. I mean, we'll wait for that clarification, but typically such decisions are not made with retrospective effect, right? Because then you lay the parameter. You don't want to do anything with retrospective effect, good or bad. So even if it's good, you might not go back in time and try and fix things. But having said that, do you think, Ashish, that you're beginning to see the green shoots of angel investing anyway coming back, and will this then give it that impetus?
100%. I think one thing that will happen immediately is that re-domiciling of startups outside of the country who were just moving away because there was angel tax, because there was a probability that people will get notices, and then there's startup investors also start getting notices. They also come under scrutiny. I think this entire ripple effect, as soon as it ends, startups will stop re-domiciling out of India just because they wanted to raise angel money. And I personally think it's a big win, because re-domiciling a company outside of India just to raise angel capital is a brain drain of a different kind, and loss of GDP and revenue, and again, like ripple effects on the economy.
In fact, tell me more about that, Amit Jain. And we've been seeing startup founders pop up suddenly in Dubai, everyone's favorite destination. People move lock, stock, and barrel and start running their company from Dubai, Singapore, wherever. And this angel tax might be some reason for it. Enough reason to come home now and just give us an idea of the kind of stress this was creating also for the community.
I think there are other programs also in UAE, etc., which promote startups to start from there. But I personally believe if your business is gonna be primarily in India, I think the best place to do business is India, and registering company here. You would be noticing now larger companies are trying to move back to India to list. In any case, it was not very fruitful for companies to go out and then come back. Now with this angel tax getting sorted out, the people who would move out for this reason should definitely look at coming back. UAE, Dubai that you're talking about has a lot of incentives also on servers, office space, a lot of stuff they're also trying to create a hub there of technology, frankly. So people who should look at UAE as an option are the ones who are trying to maybe, take those incentives and sell to the globe. But if your primary occupation is going to be in India and business is going to be in India, I would personally view this has to be done from India, as this is the main place of operation.
But it's important point. It's important point because now there is a global hunt for talent, for entrepreneurial talent as well, and India is competing. So we're just taking UAE as an example, but if those are the kind of incentives, let's talk about what more needs to be done to bring back the founders, avoid more founders departing and that kind of a brain drain happening. That question for Amit Jain.
Look, my personal view is that you will have a lot of infra already built up in India, and with the kind of startups coming in AI and space tech, as you notice now, I see no reason for people to move out. I am personally a big believer of India, and I've stayed back. I've built the company here, never got it registered outside. In fact, all our foreign offices are subsidiaries of India. So everything consolidates back. So my personal view is that more and more people are staying back. When I was passing out of IIT back then in 99, most of my batch went out, right? And now if you notice, hardly any percentage, very few percent point go out, less than 10. In my case, it was 90-95% going out. So actually the talent is now stopping back. Salaries have significantly changed now for people to stay back. More and more startup ecosystem has evolved. So I personally don't see it as a big challenge that companies starting from India is actually relocating to Dubai. It is just for the tax reasons. Investors sometimes insist that form it here. A lot of companies get funded from Y Combinator, who insists to register in America, for example. There's other reasons also which make the investments a company domicile outside. But I personally think with the angel tax getting sorted out, there's no reason I personally believe that people would still look out for domiciling outside, in my view.
Vinita, your response to that point of, do you see people coming back, a ghar vapsi of sorts, or at least more, investors not having to go, and also your view on the fact that TDS has been cut quite significantly for e-commerce down to 0.1%. Can you explain to us what the impact of that would be?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think on the Ghar Vapasi piece, I think one of the biggest one of the biggest impact that also we're going to see is the fact that over the last 2 to 3 budgets, the government has been decriminalizing a lot of these regulations. And today in the announcement, since you mentioned the topic of TDS, they also brought up the whole decriminalization of TDS delayed payments. I think, founders in their entire journey, that 0 to 1 journey, a lot of times have these honest mistakes around regulatory filings on times, and there are delays. So apart from the interest and penalties that the founders anyways are liable for, there is a risk of criminal action in India. And India is one of the only countries where for more than 1 lakh business-related reasons, there can be criminal prosecution. And I think the government has been taking action there, and I'm very grateful that today another step was taken in that direction, where on delayed TDS payments, the criminalization has been abolished. So I think that entire just ease of doing business, which is a constant pain point for a lot of investors as well as entrepreneurs. I think that getting resolved with every budget is a big step. The other thing which Amit was in fact sharing with us in the beginning was that, private capital gain tax, which was at 20%, is now down to 12.5%. I think that's another big step, because that at least reduces the gap between what the benefit of tax saving was vis-a-vis a UAE or a Singapore or a US, where a lot of founders are now moving. And I think there would be a lot more incentive for them to consider staying back in India rather than moving out. So I do feel that this, as well as the entire language of the government, by abolishing angel tax, by decriminalizing a lot of these very basic kind of regulations, by talking about the 100 crore budget for the credit guarantee for MSMEs, I think the whole 1,000 crore fund for space techs. I think the language of the government is that, a large part of employment, hopefully 5 to 10% over the next decade, will come from startups. And that is why the government believes that for India's future, it's important to make sure that startups consider India as a very, very, as probably the #1 place to set up their business in the world. And incentivizing with not just PLIs, but also with a lot of very, very startup specific schemes as well as provisions is going to be a big step. And angel investing, we're already seeing it had started growing, because a lot of while foreign direct investment had gone down, a lot of the wealthy families, HNIs in India, who made a lot of money in the markets in the last 12 months, have been looking at startups to invest. So this angel tax abolishing is going to make the floodgates open. And I think this, early stage investing is going to get a boost of not just 20-30%. My sense is probably even more in the coming 12 to 18 months.
Okay, that's an important point, that the floodgates will open to angel investing. Before I take a break, I want a quick word from Amit Jain on the impact of long-term capital gains tax for non-equity asset classes being reduced to 12.5%. The impact for those who hold private equity in their company like yourself, what does that do?
So now the rate has reduced significantly. Earlier we had to pay 20. Now it's 12.5. It's same as public and private. While it has increased for public companies, but for private companies, it's a reduction. And it's a massive boost from our perspective. And for people who eventually hold shares in a private company and secondary movements come. So I think it's a big relief, I'll be candid. This also in turn boosts more people to have investments here and then take secondaries, employees getting shares. So this does not apply to ESOP, just to be clear. It applies to equity share, founders and partly paid shareholders of the company will benefit here. From my perspective, it's a big gain. Like, let's say if we do a pre-IPO round in a private company, this will be a massive tax saving from our perspective as founders.
Okay, so massive tax saving from Amit Jain's perspective and for founders. Huge boost to space technology as well and startups in that space. Now the question is, what does the startup community do on its side? Let me start with Ashish Tulsian on this question of employment generation. And clearly this time the government is being very clear of what they expect the private sector to do, whether it's internship, whether it's incentives in terms of new employers. How do you think this actually incentivizes startups in various verticals to hire more people?
I think, Tamana, startups, one thing that I would like to also point out is that, whenever there is a startup scheme and whenever we talk about, let's say, Startup India, Stand Up India that Prime Minister launched back in 2016, we talk about tax holidays, for the startup companies. And I think one thing that I've always wondered is, I'm sure Vinita and Amit will agree, startups are not worried about tax. Startups are worried about income. Tax will come when there's going to be income and then profit, on top of it. So I think some of the steps in today's budget, including angel tax, talking about internships, first job creation, I think these are just going to encourage every, startup founder to look at these avenues where they can align with the government's mission and vision. And I'm sure that some of these are going to bloom into better policies and consecutive budgets year on. My view right now is only around that angel tax piece as well as the capital gains piece. The probability of founders and companies staying in India is also going to directly impact the job creation. So, capital gains was actually a significant, step, especially for the private, companies. We see so many examples where, founders and companies move outside the country before their exit event, which is, let's say, in line of sight, maybe 3 years out. And I think with this 12.5%, capital gains, this is not going to happen, or this is going to happen much less, which also is going to impact employment and job creation within the country, because we don't really need to go outside.
Okay. Vinita, your take on that, on how employment gets the boost, because now, you have to also deliver the jobs. At the end of the day, all these incentives are because startups are the one who can create the jobs. And while all of that money was flowing into startups a few years ago, the argument often was, that's fine, but where are the jobs?
I think I can talk about myself. We employ 4,000 people, out of which 75% are women. Today we spoke about employment rates of women being in the range of 20% going up to 37%, including formal and informal. So I think I would say, just like me and Amit and Ashish over here, we are all creating now probably startups account for almost 10 lakh jobs in India. So there is progress. And I feel that as long as the scheme that the government has launched around the contribution of PF for a month for employment provided for first jobbers, if those schemes do not have a lot of regulatory hassle, I think startups would be the first to avail of some of those benefits and deploy that into more job creation. And I think this is a massive boost for the next 5 years. I mean, what the finance minister said is that this is going to impact 4 crore young people. And I think India has this crisis of like almost 1 crore people entering the workforce every year, and them needing to be provided employment. So I think the whole idea of this scheme where there is a part contribution of Provident Fund or ESIC by the government, as well as those paid internship where the government pays the stipend. I think, if the regulation and the way to get those benefits is not too bureaucratic and doesn't take us like months of paperwork, I think we will definitely all be coming together to make that happen.
The paid internship, 10% needs to come from the company. The rest comes from the government, including that one-time payment of 6,000 rupees. So Vinita, you talked about 4,000 people, plus this internship coming in. If I were to ask you, do you feel incentivized to hire more right now after all of this? in real terms does it translate for you? Because these are all, big statements, excellent. If everyone welcomes it. Would you hire more?
We would probably consider this scheme while hiring, but hiring more not for the sake of it, because I think my board is also going to be watching this interview. So I definitely don't want to hire for the sake of hiring, because that doesn't do justice to either the company or the employees.
Yeah, okay. Ashish wants to come in, yes.
But yeah, I think Tamana, one very important piece is that I think in India, as Anita said, 1 crore plus people are joining the workforce every year. And while we keep hearing about there is a dearth of employment, I think one important part is that there is a bigger issue, which is employability in India, and that is a ripple effect of lack of economic prosperity, education avenues, etc. I think this internship, the paid internship step by government, is an extremely welcome step, and if availing this is not too bureaucratic, if it comes with ease, I can bet that every startup founder of all types and kinds in every domain will be incentivized to give internships to people, which in turn is going to make people more employable at large, even if they are not absorbed at the same company.
Amit, your last word on employment and employability. Both sides of it. I mean, employability, all right, those skilling, courses and policy and all of that is in place. But does this really allow you to employ more?
Look, I think every startup will have a demand of its own.
Yeah,
having skilled resources available obviously helps us. So we have been expanding 70% year over year. And we directly employ around 6,000 and indirectly employ around 150,000. So reality is that each startup has a big impact, not only through direct but indirect employment also. Like we have insurance agents, finance agents working on our platform. Similarly, most of the startups have created a lot of gig work, if you realize, right? And it's not just direct employment that gets impacted. My personal view is that government is super focused on innovation, research and manufacturing, if you notice in the budget. So manufacturing is not something that is being done only by established giants. Now startups have gone into manufacturing. All startups started with distribution, then they went into value chain upwards to start manufacturing certain parts of the value chain, and that's how marketplaces are evolving into transaction ensuring quality. So you will see a lot of startups actually entering this manufacturing world, creating a world of employment, is my view, especially in commodity items. A lot of agri-tech founders have come where food processing is happening. A lot of battery manufacturing startups have come. You will see a lot of disruption happening through this. So I personally believe that the budget supports for employment. They're laying out infra of India, which is transportation, roads, etc. That eases up the whole economy in a way and makes towns more connected, which enables manufacturing at various locations, thereby enabling employment. Lastly, I think government is aiming for an inclusive mix of women and men in the workforce, with the clear focus on women-led development in this budget of 3 lakh crore being kind of allocated for women led schemes only, right? I think all are great signs: inclusive workforce, creating more jobs, enabling infrastructure to enable that, and manufacturing to enable that. I think all kind of falls in place in my view.
Okay, so it all falls into place. We'll wait and see whether the actual jobs come in as well. But yeah, a good day for startups who have not really been on top of the list as far as the last few budgets have been concerned. The angel tax coming off is a huge, huge relief, if nothing else. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today to decode what the budget has meant for the startup space. And to all of our viewers, thank you for joining us as well. We'll end the show here, but stay tuned. A lot more coming up on the other side on NDTV Profit.